Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. My email address is tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Back in 2007, Richard Mille launched a watch that would become a brand-defining product. This is the warhorse on which the company has ridden to legend. Inspired by Felipe Massa, the then rising Brazilian F1 star, this is the RM011 Felipe Massa, and you can see Felipe's initials down at 7:30 on the dial. So the watch, all in titanium, is an annual calendar flyback chronograph, but first, the fit and the feel. Measuring across, not including the crown itself or the chronograph triggers, the watch is 41.4 millimeters across. It is 16.4 millimeters thick, and from lug tip to lug tip, 49.5 millimeters is the total distance across the wrist. I would say the watch actually winds up looking larger than it is because of its thickness. It is not exceptionally broad across the wrist, and you can really see that the lugs are nowhere near the edge of my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and I could see this watch wearing well on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters just because I've got so much clearance on each side. Now, the one challenge is going to be a dress cuff because you can see with the shear of the case and the overlap of the bezel, it's not going to fit easily underneath a tight sleeve, but that's not really a concern for an RM owner, as you don't buy an RM to be anonymous or make your watch disappear. Now, the watch does fit nicely because it has the curvature to its case back. You can see how there's some camber to the case back, so it hugs the wrist. The strap is wonderfully flexible, pliant, soft, and you can see that there are many different gills venting the wrist, so it does a good job of evacuating heat and moisture. From over the top, you can see just how much clearance I have on each side. And we'll take a closer look at the strap. Obviously integrated proprietary. It is vulcanized rubber. It has a sort of frosted matte finish. There's a little bit of a hollow in the flank to echo the hollows of the case side. And then we have a Richard Mille branded buckle, probably made by G&F Chatelain, which is famous for this double deployant titanium leaf spring design. You'll see it on many brands that use the Chatelain system. So it will actually snap shut and then resolutely hold shut until you pull it open sufficiently that it will then snap open. So the leaf spring is useful both for opening and for closing the clasp. There is a spline screw on each side of the buckle, echoing Richard Mille's signature assembly method. The watch also includes subtlety. As you can see, this is a grade 5 titanium buckle because it's polished and satinated. You don't see polish on grade 2. Look carefully and you can see that there are a few small polished accents on the case. For the most part, it's a muted satin finish, and you can see these columns on the side. These are the sleeves through which the spline screws are threaded, and they help to keep the watch assembled from front to back. Taking a quick look on the dial side, you can see that there's a distinct overlap of the case back and the bezel to give the side a little bit of a three-dimensional look, almost like you're looking at the skeleton of a building under construction. We have a turbine-like crown face. The crown has a rubber shoulder for easier gripping. And then we have chronograph pushers that are somewhat like the textured gas, brake, and clutch pedals of high-performance cars. The watch includes a flyback chrono, which means you can restart it without first stopping it, which is great when you're timing events in motorsports that tend to occur in rapid succession when you may not have time to stop, reset, and restart. With the flyback, you do it all in one motion. Now on the dial, we have plenty of lume. Let's take a quick look at the lume. Easy to read. You can see including some of the sub-registers. Now the dial has a carbon fiber flange outboard on which little applique luminescent indices are mounted, and then there's a second sapphire that sits over the dial on which the Arabic numerals are printed. We have several different registers, and what I love about the chronograph is that you get a chrono capability with 60-minute definition. So I have always enjoyed having a 60-minute register on my chronograph because I feel like 30 is not enough. What if you're timing an event that has a duration of 37 minutes? So having that functionality is absolutely aces for me from a chronograph enthusiast perspective. You can see the watch does have hacking or stop seconds. Let's see if we're in the date change danger zone here. By the way, look carefully and you can see down at 6 o'clock that the chronograph minute and hour hands are superimposed. So you have a 60-minute scale surrounding a scale of 12 hours. That's what's going on right there. Now, the reason I wanted to make sure we weren't in the date change zone is because the watch includes a quick-set annual calendar. So I can rapidly cycle. You can see it is a grand date. It is a big date scale, so I have a two-digit, two-disc date display. And then there's a little display down here that shows me the month. And so between the date and the month, I have an annual calendar. It only needs one correction a year during the jump from February to March. So that's how that works. It is an annual calendar. You can see that the movement underneath is actually made of grade 5 titanium. Flip the watch over, and we'll pop open that clasp one more time. And the first thing you'll note, if you are up on your maker's marks, is that there's a little Vaucher star on the base plate. And the movement base is made by Vaucher manufacturer, and then the flyback chronograph module is made by Dubois de Praz. You can also see the little V stamp on the case back, as the case was made by Valgine, which is a stakeholder and supplier in Richard Mille. RM watches have, for the most part, been constructed via a tablissage, an old-school Swiss methodology used by, among others, Vacheron and Breguet, whereby the best parts would be purchased, and then the design and the assembly would all come together under one roof. So one company, Richard Mille, would design the watch, other companies would build the parts, and then it would go to RM where it would be assembled. And that's true of all RM watches except for the really high-end ones, which are made by Audemars Piguet Renault et Papy. So grade 5 bridges and plates, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rubber shock absorbers that buffer between the titanium base plate of the movement and the case. This is a shock-resistant movement. Water resistance is 50 meters. We have a winding rotor with variable inertia. So the way this works, it's really variable polar moment. You move these white gold masses in or out. Well, you don't, but your Richard Mille watchmaker does. And that changes the turning force or polar moment of the rotor. So if you're very active, you can have it set to less active winding. If you're very sedentary and you work in an office, you can have it set to more active winding. It energizes 2 mainspring barrels for a 55-hour power reserve because it's a hybrid module on base movement, sometimes called a modular movement. It has a lot of joules. That explains the 68 joule count. It's adjusted in 5 positions, which would be standard for high horology watches and chronometers. It beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour, which was basically an industry standard high beat rate, as it's called. You can see that the barrel bridge and winding bridge have been skeletonized, giving you visual access to the barrels. And part of the logic of having 2 barrels is that you have a more even torque release from maximum wind to minimum wind. And the idea being, after, for example, 24 hours, a single barrel movement can lose quite a bit of its balance amplitude, whereas with 2 barrels in series, you lose a lot less amplitude because you have a more consistent torque flow to the escapement. That's the real reason that there are 2 barrels in this watch. Reach out to Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this Richard Mille RM011 Felipe Massa.